Welcome to Hope is Here. My name is Greg Horn. Want to talk to you today about the comfortable cross. We have been in a series on Monday and Tuesday the past 4 weeks looking at, are you a fan or are you a follower of Jesus? And we kind of been saying that, hey, Jesus isn't looking just for enthusiastic admirers. He's looking for completed followers. Kind of trying to raise the bar for us as followers of Jesus. And the first week we looked at, back in early May, we looked at DTR, defining the relationship with Jesus. Because the fact of the matter is that many people decide they want to follow Jesus, but they truly never commit. And our world does everything it can to just kind of water down the gospel and kind of try to get us self-absorbed with so many other things instead of being a devoted follower of Jesus Christ. And this series we've been talking about over the past 4 weeks is we're looking at to take a deep look within and ask the question, you know what? Are you all in? Are you all in? I want to ask you that question. Recently, asked that question. I had a lady that came forward at the end of the service at Gardenside Christian Church in Lexington, where I'm pastor, and just said, hey, what is your decision today? And she said, well, I'm all in. And so we got to talk after the service later, and just I said, talk to me about this process. She said, well, I've been going to church, and she said, yes, I had accepted Jesus, believed in him, but I never had followed through with getting baptized, and I really wasn't all in. And she said, I'm just finally to the point in my life where God's really just saying, hey, I want you to be all in with me, and I want to follow through and surrender my life completely to Jesus and act of obedience of being baptized. And this was a beautiful thing. A person in their 50s, had been kind of showing up church, but, honestly, they just said, I was a fan. I've been a fan, and I want to be a follower. So maybe that's where you're at today. And not judging anybody, I'm not about condemning, but I know the Holy Spirit convicts, okay? And it's convicted me before. And maybe you've kind of gotten off track, and you're kind of like, Greg, if I'm honest, I'm really more just a fan than a follower. Man, I'm so glad you're listening today, or maybe you're watching on our YouTube channel. Been having some technical difficulties, and we've not been able to show those over the last few weeks, but I think we've got the technical glitches figured out, and so you can also watch on our YouTube channel. We'd really appreciate it if you'd subscribe to that. Most of our programs are on that. Like I said, we've had problems the last few weeks, but I believe we're back on track now, and hope that you'll check that out, subscribe to it, leave a comment if you've been blessed by a program. Then the second week back in May, we looked at the open invitation, and we looked at Luke chapter 14, where Jesus shared the story of the great banquet. And we looked at what excuses we make, just like they did back in the story Jesus shared in Luke 14 about why we're not a devoted follower of Jesus. And we looked at that, man, just like this banquet, God winded up inviting everyone and anyone. And that's why Jesus arrived on the scene. And, we all have to make a decision about that open invitation. Can't rely on our parents' faith, our grandparents' faith, our aunt's faith, our spouse's faith. We have to make the decision to be a follower of Jesus ourselves. And we also we're brutally honest that there is a urgency and a finality with this open invitation. And we all going to complete our journey here on earth. And the question is, are you ready? Are you ready to stand before God? And then last week, we looked at choosing intimacy. Choosing intimacy. We talked about looking at, being a follower of Jesus is more about a relationship, a personal relationship over a religion. And it's about knowing instead of just knowing about. It's one thing to say Jesus, but it's another to know about him, really know him. We looked at Psalm 139, and just David, you could tell as David wrote Psalm 139, here's a guy that knew about God, knew God intimately. Jesus hadn't arrived yet, but he knew God. And Psalm 139 is a beautiful, beautiful chapter in the Bible, that psalm. I really would encourage you, if you haven't read it for a while or you've never read it, it's powerful and just shows you the type of intimacy God wants to have with us. And we looked at barriers to intimacy with God. And we looked at God's initiative in having intimacy with us. So if you missed any of these programs over the last few weeks, I want to encourage you to go to our website, hopeisheretoday.org. That's hopeisheretoday.org. All of our programs are available. We just went over 120,000 downloads recently. I'm so amazed what God has done in the past 7 years. And man, if you've been blessed by a program, share it with somebody, post it on social media. This ministry has blessed you. Man, we would appreciate if you'd make a financial donation. It helps us provide this ministry to help so many people. And you can go to our website, hopeisheretoday.org. There's a mailing address if you'd like to write a check. Also safe and secure online, available as giving through PayPal and text to give. Man, we would really, really appreciate it. And the best thing is all donations are tax deductible. Well, today I want us to look at the comfortable cross. And, the foundation of this series for us has been Luke chapter 9, verse 23, when Jesus said to them all, he said, if any of you wants to be my follower, you must give up your own way and take up your cross daily and follow me. Then in John chapter 3, verse 30, John was asked, hey, who do we follow? We keep following you, or do we follow Jesus? And John simply said, this short but powerful verse that is still true. It's never been more true, but wow, 2,000 years later, just so many people, I know it's something I need to be reminded of daily, that Jesus must increase and I must decrease. We'll say that again, John chapter 3, verse 30. Jesus must increase and I must decrease. Oh, friends, there's just power in that relationship with Jesus, and he wants to know you on a more intimate level, but we've got to choose to do that and say, hey, I'm all in. C.S. Lewis said, if you want a religion to make you feel comfortable, I certainly don't recommend Christianity. I'll say that again. C.S. Lewis with this powerful quote, if you want a religion to make you feel comfortable, I certainly don't recommend Christianity. Friends, being a follower of Jesus, it's not complicated, but it's not easy, okay? It can really be challenging at times, yet I'm thankful because of what Jesus went through on the cross, and that once 3 days later the tomb was empty and Jesus was alive, that hope was alive. We can have hope because of the cross. But the fact of the matter is, a lot of times, I think if we're honest now in today's culture, we've kind of gotten used to a comfortable cross. And, comfort craving fans, what do you do with something like the cross? It's pretty hard to avoid the cross when you're a Christian, right? What can you do with a phrase like take up your cross, which we just talked about that Jesus said in Luke chapter 9, verse 23. What I found is that fans eventually find a way to even make the cross comfortable. They create a comfortable idea of the cross and what it means for us today to take up our crosses. The phrase like, we all have our crosses to bear gets thrown around loosely, referring to even the most menial or everyday task and inconveniences. And the cross gets pushed back to the back of sermons quite often, Bible studies, only makes its annual appearance at Easter. And even though it's on our churches, our T-shirts, and around our necks, if we're honest, a lot of times we just make it a comfortable cross. But what are we supposed to do, right? The cross is a tough sell. It's bad enough that Jesus had to die on the cross, but why did he have to go insist that we all end up with our own crosses? Let's be honest, isn't that kind of maybe ruining Christianity's hope for decent public relations? Doesn't the cross hinder our ability to recruit more people? We're all wanting to try to put our best foot forward, right? And don't we want more people to come to Jesus? Well, that's supposed to be the point, right? But having more people come to Jesus and trying to make put our best foot forward to Christianity sounding as appealing as possible. But let's be honest, what have we sacrificed in return then? In 1 Corinthians chapter 1, Paul talks about how the world sees the cross when he says in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 18, For the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to those who are being saved, it is the power of God. You know, for those that were living in the first century, the cross was the ultimate symbol of weakness. For many then and now, the message of the gospel that God came to earth in the form of man and was crucified is complete foolishness. I mean, why would God use a symbol of torture, of death, of weakness to save the world? I suppose the idea of the cross seems more appealing to us because it's no longer used to execute people and we've dressed it up. We're used to seeing the cross as an ornament, a decoration, or a piece of jewelry. But if a first century Jew came in and saw an illuminated cross hanging from our walls, they would think we are sick. Imagine people walking around with a guillotine hanging around their neck or electric chair dangling from their ears. For the Jews, the cross meant weakness. And I think that's God's point. That's what makes the cross so beautiful. God takes what from a human perspective is foolish. He chooses what has no glory and carries no honor. He finds the least likely symbol for love and life and says, you know what? I'll use that. God takes what the world says is foolish, demeaning, and shameful and says, hey, watch this, and turns it into the power of salvation. We looked at 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 18. If we go on down to verse 22, verse 22 through 25, it says, you know, the Jews demand miraculous signs and Greeks look for wisdom. But we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to the Jews and foolishness to the Gentiles. For the foolishness of God is wiser than man's wisdom, and the weakness of God is stronger than man's strength. Man, I love that. Kyle Ottoman, who wrote a book called Not a Fan. There's a really good Bible study with it. I did about 15 years ago, and is a foundation for what really made me want to do this series I've been doing called Fan or Follower. Says, you know, who else but God could take a cross that represented defeat and turn it into a symbol of victory? Who else but God could take a cross that represented guilt and turn it into the symbol for grace? Who else but God could take the cross that represented condemnation and turn it into a symbol of freedom? And who else but God could take a cross that represented pain and suffering and turn it into a symbol of healing and hope? Who else but God could take a cross that represented death and turn it into a symbol of life? Friends, no one else could, but God can. What seems like the ultimate moment of God's weakness was in reality the ultimate moment of God's strength. Here's why that matters. And here's what I don't want you to miss as we wrap up today's program. The powerful point for today, and it's a thing that I just want you to take away from today. What God did for the cross, he can do for you. I'll say that again. What God did for the cross, he can do for you. That's when you are the weakest. You're exactly where you need to be for God to be the strongest. The upside down truth of the cross is that when you are weak, you are strong. In 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 27, it says, but God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise, and God chose the weak things of this world to shame the strong. Friends, it's not that God used the cross in spite of its weakness. He chose the cross because of its weakness. Oh, friends, I love that. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but I hope that you'll join us again tomorrow. If you've been blessed by this program, share it with somebody else. My name's Greg Horn, and we'll see you tomorrow on Hope is Here.